about our gathering here today. Now, some of you may be familiar with Wisdom Weaver's origin, but for those of you who are not, let me just give you a little refresher. In 2017, 13 Indigenous elders gathered in Hawaii to ask, what is the state of the world as you see it now, and what must we be doing? What emerged from the gathering was Wisdom Weavers of the world, and this unified message: bring humankind back into the heart. Now in 2021, Wisdom Weavers has co-created a project to breathe life into this message. It is a series we are calling Into the Heart, Indigenous Pathways to Love. We began this series last month with a ceremony and a webinar, just as we are doing this month. And it is our intention to share messages from our loving elders every month with our community, leading right up to our in-person gathering in 2022. If you happen to have missed our ceremony yesterday, we will put a link to the recording in the chat box. But today, our webinar is called Acknowledge the Wound, a Pathway to Peace and Forgiveness. This conversation will surround ancestral wounds from imbalance and oppression, and how these wounds influence our lives and our language today. This conversation may be painful at times, but I invite all of you to remember that on the other side of pain is healing. On the other side of fear is love. And remember that we are honoring this wound together as a community. Healing wounds is a deep and complex process, so we wish you to understand that we do not have all the answers, but we are offering a wise place to begin. Today, we will be just barely touching the surface, and it is our intention to carry on this conversation next month when Wisdom Weavers will co-create ceremonies and webinars from November 18th to the 21st. Today, however, we are inviting you to submit your questions, which may or may not be answered today just because of time, but we will definitely utilize your questions to help inform our gathering in November. Lastly, I invite you to please consider supporting Wisdom Weavers Into the Heart series. If by the end of this webinar you feel nourished, please consider reciprocating by nourishing our work through a financial donation. We will put the link to our donation page in the chat box. And last but not least, I want to thank our amazing speakers here today and our larger community for coming together and sharing this heart space with us. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll start with Ellick. Is that who we start with?
Thank you, Maria. Kelam ekamna, kelam kasudha, tingunangan way, hunangan asofta kuyak, kelach ekamna achin. Hello, I said hello, my other self, and that I am unangan. It means our people have a very spiritual grounding. We have stories about us coming from Egypt, going to out of Mongolia, to Siberia, to Kamchatka, and across by skin boat in the Bering Sea. And we've been there for 10,000 years and over, and we're still here. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here, and especially the women. It's very, very good that the majority of the people who are here are women. I was born in a generation that had the last traditional upbringing amongst my people, and since we have limited time, I'm just going to go right into it. I work with a group of people called the Wisdom Weavers of the World, as Maria mentioned. And I am key spokesperson for the Wisdom Weavers. Wisdom Weavers was created by inviting elders from all over the world to share their knowledge. And as Maria pointed out, there were two questions that we answered. One, what is the state of the world as we see it now? And two, what must we be doing now? And we launched it last year. We put together a 14-minute film, which can be seen on our website, www.wisdomweavers.world, that was translated into 15 different languages and spread around the world by Reuters. And the first day we had 80,000 people that saw the film, so we had a good launch. The elders say that we have a chance in this lifetime. All the people here in this lifetime we chose to be here during this time, and that we have gifts to give to the world. And this is something that we need to access now, because the elders are saying that Mother Earth has survived for millions of years, and she's going to survive for millions more, billions. And it's a question about whether or not human beings will survive. And it's going to be up to us, alive in this lifetime on Mother Earth, that's going to decide whether or not human beings are going to survive and thrive. And that the elders are saying that, when we left our hearts, before, traditionally, the heart used to tell the mind what to do, and the mind's job is to implement that which your heart is telling you. And now it's reversed, where the brain, the mind, controls everything, including it's saying that it's the heart. But it's really the mind working, and the mind and the ego has created this situation that we face here today in the world, with all the political corruption, the wars, the gross violation of women, the refugees, the food shortages, etc., that we all know, and that we created these things because we have separated from our hearts. Now, this story began a long time ago with the swing of like a pendulum going back and forth between masculine imbalance and feminine imbalance. And the last swing of that pendulum, according to our stories, began 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, and we're still in it today, which is the masculine imbalance. And this masculine imbalance created the situation where we left our hearts. And when we left our hearts, we separated from ourselves. And when you separate from yourself, it's easy to separate from others and Mother Earth. And this separation is the cause for all the world's ills today, according to the elders. And that to heal it, we must reverse the reversal of the mind telling the heart what to do, and go from the mind to the heart would tell the mind what to do. And the mind's job is to implement that which your heart is telling you. And this is a big task and a very difficult one for most people, because you don't want to touch the fear and the pain and the traumas of our lifetime, because going to your heart means feeling. And when we feel, we're going to feel these hurts that we have created intergenerationally and in this generation. And, there's no one that is not traumatized in the world by these kinds of things. In Europe, They had the Inquisition, we had the Crusades, we had the internecine warfare between all the countries before they came over to the Americas. And the people then separated from their hearts, and thus we got created what we have in the Americas, which was the loss of 100 million Native Americans and the ills that we have created here today. And in South America, we have this thing that is said, I mean, it covers all of the Americas, where when the eagle and the condor get together and shed a tear together, a great healing shall begin on Mother Earth. Now, it's no accident that the eagle is north, and that's in our heads, and that the south is the heart. And all the elders from all these traditions around the Americas have been working at the eagle condor gatherings to bring together the mind and the heart. And they said, until this is done, we're going to continue the suffering. Now, nothing new is going to be created during these times. Even the state-of-the-art thinking, the state-of-the-art technologies, they're nothing but the regurgitation of the old in new form. So, for example, we create hybrid fuels supposedly to help the environment. And when the U.S. converted to hybrid fuels or made it a priority, then a lot of the world's farmers took to converting their crops from food crops to fuel crops. And that resulted in increase of price of food around the world and increased starvation. This is an example of the state-of-the-art thinking. And what the elders are saying is that we must have the courage now to go to the heart and process all the traumas that we have had and that we have and let it go. And when we let it go, we are in the heart, which is a place that is present in the moment, and you're in your heart. And the rest, it is understood by many people that the rest will be taken care of. My people lived that way for thousands of years. And they didn't plan anything. Now, in today's world, we have to plan out of fear and the need to control and manage our lives. And there are some individuals who have created the structures around the world which calls for their control and their management. But it's all based on fear. And this fear, when you go to your heart, there is no fear. There's love, there's compassion, there's understanding, there's patience, all these things that we want in the world today. And the elders say, nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. And so we criticize others on the outside because we're criticizing ourselves first. We judge others on the outside because we're judging ourselves first. And we are at war because we're at war with ourselves. Nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. So thank you.
Thank you, Valerian. I believe now we will turn it over to Reverend Michael. I also want to mention we had a lovely human being joining us today, Elder Sal, and unfortunately, due to some family emergencies, he's not able to join us. But Reverend Michael is his colleague and partner in many of these conversations. So thank you, Reverend Michael, for using your voice and helping us bring Elder Sal's in here as well. And we hope you all get to meet Elder Sal in November. So
By the way, he's from Warm Springs.
Yes, the Warm Springs tribe. Thank you, in Oregon.
That's right. Can you, everyone, Sal and I'm Reverend Michael Ellick. I'm a former Buddhist monk. I'm a Christian minister, but also a community organizer here in the Pacific Northwest that works with a lot of our indigenous communities and other communities of faith around issues of justice and equity and peacemaking. And, I met Sal, and I won't get into his biography, I'll let him share that, but we share in common a desire to work with something called the Doctrine of Discovery. And if you're here today, you saw that in the promotion, and just to offer some context for that wound and what it means in our lives. The Doctrine of Discovery was a series, let me time myself just to make sure that I don't talk too long. And cut me off if you need to, Maria. But the Doctrine of Discovery was a series of papal bulls in the 1400s, really, is when that started. And bulls are proclamations by the Pope, who was, for all intents and purposes, once upon a time, the international law of Europe. And when we were in our European so-called age of discovery, when we were discovering, and I say that ironically and in italics and quotes, the North America, what would become known as North America, there was this difficulty that it was already occupied, that there were already people there. And so part of what happened was, and this is a gross simplification, was the Pope declared a series of statements that became legal precedent for all of the countries inhabiting the New World, which basically said any white Christian European nation that had the opportunity to come and claim land had the right to do so and to dispose, however they saw fit, of anyone else on that land who had a claim. Now, part of those statements were also an explicit naming that the native peoples, the first peoples of this land, were less than human because they were not Christian, they were implicitly not white, and because from the perspective of European Christendom, they were not civilized as well. So if we're on this call and we're awake and alive and paying attention, we know that there is a legacy of racism and colonialization, and that is something we continue to grapple with until this day. But the Doctrine of Discovery was the way that was enshrined into law. It was the formulation of that, not just as a series of implicit cultural statements, but as a concrete document. And interestingly enough, that when the United States formed its own government, much later than those early arrivals of the Europeans, what we found was that they used that Doctrine of Discovery as legal precedent. And in fact, to this day, our court systems still go back to legal precedent set by the Doctrine of Discovery to justify their actions in disputes over land with local tribes here in the Northwest. And in fact, Sal's son, a man named Jode Gowdy and Stephen Newcomb, run a website called redthought.org, which looks at in great detail how that is still being used today. That it's not just a story of something happened way back when, but that theological statement of racism and of colonial, let's call it supremacy, is still enshrined inside our system. So that's, Sal comes with these stories, but what I'd like to share as part of that is that I come from a generation of people raised on I was raised on a tribal land, grew up with children from that tribe in my school, and I would hear these things, and I would always think to myself, well, that doesn't really impact me directly. Like I didn't do those things. I don't have any legacy of racism. I never took anyone's land, and so as tragic as that is, as sad as that is, it's in the past, and can't we just move on and so forth? And I get the temptation of such an argument. But one of the things I found as I grew up and started to work as an organizer for social and economic justice was that we can't really leave that past behind. And, an analogy I like to use, and then I'll share a personal story, is, I can go and rob my friend's house and take all their things and have them here at my house across the street. And then I can say, will you forgive me for robbing all your things and taking them? And maybe my friend will say yes, but my plea for forgiveness is just a little moot, a little bit without integrity, if I'm still holding all those things and my friend is out on the street. And so this is the kind of illustration that my friend Sal and others will use when we say that while we were not present for these atrocities, we as white people are the inheritors of that wound. We are the legacy of that wound and still bear the benefits economically, socially, when it comes to property or social mobility. And nothing illustrates that more than learning what life is like on so many of our reservations across the country. So, fun fact, I am a Christian minister, and my great-great-grandfather, G.W. Alcorn, was a Christian minister as well. And what he is known for is as using Christianity to go and convert Native Americans to the faith in Oklahoma when they were forced there over the Trail of Tears to form the nation of Oklahoma, the Indian nation of Oklahoma, which lasted until oil was discovered, and then it was slowly dismantled for this and that reason. But interestingly enough, what I inherit from that great-great-grandfather, and it was given to me unironically on my ordination day, is a Bible and a gun. The Bible and the gun. And those two artifacts tell a whole story about how the spiritual traditions of white people were used as a weapon and as a tool of domestication. So I hold on to those two things, not because I'm proud of them, but because there's some deep kind of reckoning I feel called to do as a person who is from here, was raised here, but also inherit this complicated story. Now, this is depressing things to share, and it's sad to hear it. But one of the things we'd like to talk about in November is the way we can reckon with that and how forgiveness must start. And so I lead a group of, I think we've got 60 faith communities around the Northwest that are doing work to reckon with that history with integrity. And that begins, and there's all sorts of activities happening around that. But it begins with an acknowledgement of hard truths. That when we look at those painful realities that we don't want to look at, naturally we want to veer away. The ego wants to say, oh, nope, not me, not part of me. But that there is a profound gift that occurs. This is what we're finding together. There is a profound gift of grace and spirit that cannot be delivered any other way than looking into those dark places. In my Christian tradition, we call them the dark night of the soul, is one of the words we use, but it's central to the Christian spirituality, that we look at those hard things and that there's some kind of deliverance that happens when we can tell the truth, acknowledge that truth, and start to make amends in community through forgiveness and acts of reparation and reconnection. I'm mindful of going on too much, but I'll just give a few examples. We had plenty of traditions here in Oregon. I live in Portland, Oregon, that said to me and said to Sal, oh, we asked for forgiveness years ago. We've tried to make amends with the local tribes, and I won't name the names of this church or the tribe in question here in Oregon. And we said, well, that's wonderful. What kind of relationship do you have with the tribe that's all around you? And to our surprise, there was no relationship. There was no bonds of healing. So although I get pegged as an organizer of social justice, activist type issues, I don't think of myself in these terms, but rather as someone who builds relationships between people. And so by acknowledging those painful realities, not just in the way they happened in the past, but the way they continue to hold on as a legacy of disconnection, of a lack of truth-telling. And what I love about Wisdom Weavers is this is where it starts, that we start by building those relationships, by listening to each other, by meeting each other, by breaking bread, by sharing each other's stories. And out of that, discovering that our wellness and healing as a people can never come by just being an isolated self. It comes when we recognize that we are beings in relationship with each other, with the land around us, and even with our ancestors that came before us, and all our descendants that come down the road. So this is a minuscule outline of the work that we do here in the Northwest, but I just want to thank Wisdom Weavers for allowing us to share some of it. And with luck and grace and spirit, we'll have a chance to go more into the nitty, dark, but grace-filled details of how this kind of work can function, not just in our context, but all around the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend Michael. So we have two more speakers to hear from, and I would like to ask Elder Suzanne, do you feel ready to speak, or would you like Kosin to go first?
We can go first.
Okay.
Yep, thanks.
All right, Kosin.
Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. My name's Kosin Greg Snyder. I'm a Zen Buddhist priest. I'm in New York right now, and I was actually listening to when Kuyuk was speaking. I heard the 100 million number, which I've heard many times, and what struck me was, in 1500. The world population was roughly considered about 400 million. By 1800, it was 800 million. And I think there's something important for our hearts to recognize that we're talking, depending on where we're pegging, from an eighth to a quarter of the world's population. It's an enormous wound. When we're talking about acknowledging a wound, it's an incomprehensible wound. And I come from a tradition that does not believe that ancestors disappear, and that they are walking with us, and that they are here with us. So these ancestors are with us. And so I just want to acknowledge that, starting out, that for only the heart, again to Kuyuk's point, only the heart is big enough, only the heart is vast enough to be able to metabolize what we're talking about. And the thing that strikes me in the Doctrine of Discovery that Reverend Michael so eloquently laid out is that how this is in us now. This wound is in us now. This doctrine is in us now. I find it striking that in these papal bulls, there is no shyness about the term Christian empire. And which is interesting when you go back and read them. It's a little bit, wow, they were really clear. They were not shy about saying what they were doing. And that this Christian empire goes back to its Roman expression prior to Christianity picking up Romanized Christianity and becoming an empire itself. And that this masculine imbalance, again, that was named in imperial culture, that is the imbalance. They're soldiers, and they're soldiers that are expanding, and they're soldiers that are taking over the world. And the relationship that happens is one by which everything when I feel into what it is in our bodies, It is a relationship of a body moving over territory and people that are not being humanized in any way. They are objects to be, and this has been talked about, they are objects to be controlled. This was, of course, done to the native people of Europe, and then it kept going from there. And it strikes me when Reverend Michael speaks, it strikes me this idea of we were not there. And so what's this have to do with us? But of course, I think probably many on this call resonate with, well, all of that is still here. It's in our bodies. And although we weren't at the moment this happened, those moments are in our bodies. So how does that, and when we're addressing this wound, when we're acknowledging this wound, how do we acknowledge it not only in our society, but in ourselves, and also how the doctrine of discovery is affecting our very behavior as people, interpersonally, and as a society of private property and owning land, where we're dehumanizing each other because it's so deeply connected to a way we construct a self. Is a self something that is against a world? We often talk about separation, but a self that's against a world, that is in a dominating relationship to a world that I'm going out and that I'm acquiring and discovering and owning. This is common. This is a common way for the dominant culture to behave. This is not a, when we say this has nothing to do with us, actually it has everything to do with us. It's the way dominant culture relates to the world. Mother Earth herself is dehumanized. Women are considered closer to the earth, dehumanized. Native people are dehumanized. There is a kind of recognition of the humanizer is the conqueror. But really, the conqueror is the dehumanizer, right? The conqueror is the one who's dehumanizing themselves and everyone else around them. But the belief of the conqueror is that they're the humanizer. They're going to convert the person into a human being somehow. But the opposite is happening. The conquering mentality is actually dehumanizing the world and everything in its way, and the conqueror themselves. And so this split happens in our body. This split happens in our body that, again, that's been talked about, which is this rational intellectual mind. And it's a very interesting way of organizing the world, because if I create a rational, logical mind, and we see this in Enlightenment thinking in Europe, it's somehow transferable to anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to pay attention to land or where it comes from or anything. It's just this mind that floats around the universe that can be used anywhere in any way, and it's somehow transferable. It's a fantastic model of self for empire. And, but if we fall into the body and we give up that way of being, then the body's in place. The body is with land. The body is with the ancestors of that land. And the very notion of what it is to reason, what it is to think with the body, cannot understand itself without the land, and can't understand itself without human connection with the land and each other. And so this acknowledging of the wound and then moving to some sort of peace, this path from a disembodied thinking mind to an embodied heart, that is, that actually won't allow us, when it's fully awake, won't allow us to dominate another person. Because it's just, the connection is too deeply strong. You know, this greeting that we hear always in Wisdom Weavers, which is, I'm greeting my other self. This is the wisdom of the body. This is the wisdom of the heart. And we talk about the heart, and there's also something else we talk about. And the reason I want to talk about the body is I really believe that decolonization must happen in the body. We have to create laws. We have to do the political work. We have to recognize what laws are holding these violent ways of being and creating structures that allow land to still be held by those who have stolen it and so on. All that work has to be done. but it won't really be metabolized. It won't really transform, I don't believe, unless our bodies can go through a process of being decolonized. And I think one of these ways is to open up these different ways of wisdom that are functioning. And we've talked about the heart, but I think it's really important, and we also talk about this, about the womb. In my tradition, it's called the hara, because the tradition is a lot of men, so they don't say womb, they say hara, but the energy is in the same place. And this energy that is sensual, that connects us to the earth, that connects us to the fire of the earth, that allows us to know that we are not alone, that the earth is holding us. This flip from I am owning to the earth to Mother Earth holding us, then it makes no sense. Our hearts can't possibly imagine the idea of owning Mother Earth. This is like, it's painful to say the words, actually. To own Mother Earth is painful words to say. And the heart can barely tolerate the words, much less the action. And so there is, I think this kind of, for me, it feels like along with the work that we have to organize and collectively do, we also have to collectively recognize the degree that the Enlightenment European mindset around the self has been internalized and is causing our behavior in many, in a lot of detailed and nuanced ways. And to feel into that and to be mindful of it and allow it to transform into something that is far more vulnerable, but far more connected and far more supported and far more alive. We're giving up power for life. We're actually giving it up. The exchange is that we actually have let life is here instead of domination, that our deep connection to all things become present to us. So on the other side of this very painful thing that Reverend Michael pointed out, the difficulty of white people giving up all of these things, power and all of these things, what's on the other side of that, even though that's a very painful pathway, is wholeness and joy and love and connection and to be a human being again. And I'll stop there. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate being invited.
Thank you, Kosin. Very powerful. Decolonization has to happen in the body. All right. Elder Suzanne, do you feel ready to say a few words?
Yeah, well, yes. I hope I feel ready.
You're beautiful.
I'm taking this away.
Thanks a
She
lot.
doesn't even know what I'm saying. But I'm so inspired by the words that we've heard today. And something just came to me as I listened about this, what inhabits our body. And 40 years ago, it's the 40th anniversary this year. 40 years ago, I'm Helen, and I've worked with Suzanne for the past 40 years. And 40 years ago, Suzanne and I put our first steps on the Pribilof Islands. That's where we met Kuyuk. And everything that's been said today resonates for me in one story that happened back in 1981. And the amazing thing today is that we saw something on Facebook that the two of the films that we made with the Unangan people, Larry's village, are being shown today on his island. And at that time, we had this idea that we'll make the film and you people, the local people, can narrate. And it was just the most audacious idea. And we were just like scolded over and over again by the outside world. But I just wanted to relate, just to tie things together with a story that happened to us early on while we were there. We couldn't understand why we, as these two women who came with our film cameras, were so tossed out by the local community. We called Aleuts at the time because that was the white word that was assigned to these people. And while we were there in July, I think we arrived in July, soon after we got there, there was an accidental death. A man named Isaiah drowned. And it was a horrible thing in the village. It just, the next day, everybody gathered in the little Orthodox church, and they quickly constructed a coffin, and his body was laid out there, and the whole community gathered around. And we were at the back of this church, just like, oh my God, like already he's in this coffin, and what do we do with this? And we were so nervous about being there as outsiders in something that was so organic of the village. And we didn't know what was going on, but we just sort of followed along, and there was a funeral. And then right away, everybody went quickly to the cemetery. And we thought, oh my goodness, what do we do? So we followed along, and we saw them load the coffin onto a truck, and we walked. And it was like from one side of the village to another. It was a long hill. We went down the hill and walked up the other side. And there were three of us, three women, and we didn't have cameras or anything, but we walked. And all the trucks in the village and vehicles, and there weren't tons at the time, passed us as they zoomed over to the cemetery to do the ceremony there. And I'll never forget how lonely that walk was, that we walked and all we could do was ponder the legacy that we had inherited. It wasn't us. We didn't do this. We didn't treat the Aleut people this way, but yet we had to be one with this profound reckoning of what that meant, how it inhabited our bodies, how it inhabited our consciousness. And we finally got up to the cemetery, and they were just finishing the ceremony, and Father Michael Lestenkoff was there, and he was advising everybody about how to very carefully take the ropes and put the body down. He said, don't put the head down first. Make sure the head follows, like put the foot of the coffin down first. And so we stood at the very periphery of this and watched. And at the very end, there was a dish, like a pie plate of rice with a cross, an Orthodox cross that was outlined in raisins. And at the end of every funeral, this is passed around to all the people clustered around the grave. And so we stood there feeling so awkward and so loaded with this inheritance that we did not realize we had. And we'll never forget the woman whose husband had died said to this little boy who was passing this one plate around, one spoon, everybody took a spoonful and ate it, crossed themselves, and then it was passed on to the next. And she said, she saw us standing there, and she said, Michael, share it with them. Share it. Share it with everyone. And in that moment, we absorbed it, and yet we were freed by it. It was such a major thing that happened in our lives that has guided us here to this moment that we share with you, with Kuya, and all of you who are gathered here today and who just inspired me to share this story with you and to let our elder Suzanne take it from here. And thank you for all that you remind us of. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Excuse me, but I do have some emotions. So I'd like to start with reading a short piece on purple. In first grade, Mr. Lohar said my purple teepee wasn't realistic enough. That purple was no color for a tent. That purple was a color for people who died. That my drawing wasn't good enough to hang with the others, I walked back to my seat, counting the swish, swish, swishes of my baggy corduroy trousers. With a black crayon, nightfall came to my purple tent in the middle of an afternoon. In second grade, Mr. Barta said, draw anything. He didn't care what. I left my paper blank. And when he came around to my desk, my heart beat like a tom-tom. He touched my head with his big hand and in a soft voice said, the snowfall, how clean and white and beautiful. That was by Alexis Rotella from Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. That has always moved me. And because I'm a professional artist, I have been all my life. And that way of looking at someone's art was so profound to me, so profound. His white piece of paper was how he drew the snowfall. Isn't that beautiful? So I wanted to ask a few questions about our talk today. And one of the things that I really have to grapple with in Canada, I have 2 citizenships, but in the States, and I had an excellent education at University of Chicago for my academics and the Art Institute for my profession. But at University of Chicago, we have to ask why. And we had to ask why several questions with that. We're told we have to ask why for every lesson we do. Otherwise, you have to leave the class for good. Okay. So here's the questions. What? Why? Who wins? Who loses? How much? And for how long? And then what? And to this day, I pass this on to everyone because Canadians are not brought up to ask why. Drives me nuts. And we talk about it all the time. And they say, we're just not encouraged to ask why. It's prying, it's this and this. Oh my God. Anyway, so this is what I keep in front of my students, is to ask these 5 questions, or what do we have? 5 questions. Let's say 7 questions. We'll get there. So anyway, when we question, we find out from our fellow human beings. And that's why I'm questioning all the time, because I want to find out. And if you call that prying, well, I guess that's holy prying. Okay. So I told a man that fear and guilt were fighting. He said, I hope one of them won. I said, they both won because they both lost. So this is how we learn discernment. And I talk about discernment and not judgment. we're so full of judgment right away. Oh, I know about that. Yeah, yeah, I know about that. And then he's doing that. No, 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 no. Do we make any time in our culture for contemplation, for pondering, and most of all, for wondering? And I listen to everyone, and I'm sitting there saying, I wonder if, I wonder, I wonder, no, 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 no. And that's what I do. I wonder, and then I ponder what each person is saying. It's important what each person says. Everyone is important. And so this is how we choose to know. How do we choose to know? And where do we say, oh, I know that? Oh, yeah, I know. And I say, what do you know? What is it you just said? And on and on. And so we don't have time. This is another thing. We don't seem to have time when we talk about the disasters that's happened all through history. And then if you ask those 7 questions, you'll find out something. Because the last of those questions is, and then what? And that's what you were talking about. And then what? And so this is where, in asking questions like which is, you can ask the question, blah, 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 oh, which? That is conceptual. Then there's why, which is evaluative, which is how, which is procedural, and what if, suppositional. So the which is conceptual. So if we look at those questions, and when I was studying my academics at University of Chicago, oh my God, they had a whole section just for people in the arts, all of the arts. They set up a whole curriculum just for artists because they knew we were, a bit screwy. So they fixed that for us to learn how to ask, to find out. And this is where I feel that questioning does not seem to flourish today. And I'm very disturbed that inquiry has, what was that word, Jen? Inquiry, what's that mean? Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were on social media. What's happened to us in social media is no inquiry, no questions. We're looking for the answers as fast as we can get them. And I've asked, because I don't have social media, so I've asked people with them, I said, how come you have so much impatience? What do you mean? What do you mean? I said, just what I said. What do you mean? What do you mean? Impatience. So we haven't asked the questions, the 7 questions, and then what? And what I see is a major problem with our attitude and with our beliefs today, with whomever around the world. When inquiry is dead, we're in serious trouble. Because we just watch the news. I watch the news every night. Helen doesn't want to watch it. But I watch it on this computer business here because I want to see how humans are acting on this planet. And I'm finding what is missing is humility. Humility. We don't have humility. We have judgment. We don't have discernment. We have judgment. And that's the same as judging history, judging science, judging philosophy, judging religion. We're full of it. And then we worship FOMO. You know what FOMO is, yeah? Fear of missing out. I was taught that by my computer people a long time ago. Oh, Suzanne, what do you think of FOMO? And I'm going, huh, FOMO? Huh? And then they tell me, and I go, oh. And that's what's happening. So we speed up information so we don't have to really think. What? We don't have to think. What'd you say? THINK. Oh, the sink. No, forget it. But that's what happens to us because we've speeded up everything. I don't have time. I don't have time for thinking about humility. What is it when you finally see, which for me, maybe it's because I'm an artist, I don't know. But for me, everyone on the planet, I don't care if it's Hitler or what's his name? What was the last guy? Trump. I can't even remember his name. Trump, any of the other people. Why do we say, why should I care about him? He's terrible. Hitler, terrible. Do you know what he did? And you know what I say to him? I said, do you realize that Jesus could have done nothing without his disciples? Duh. He needed people to help him. So do you think Hitler could do what he does, or Trump do what he does, or anybody else you want to call up forever, whatever? They could do much of anything without a following. And here we go, and we put up our flags and we get out our guns and our clubs and George Floyd, well, he was just a black man. He just made a mistake. So boom, everything. And we're out to kill like crazy. And I keep saying, why are we doing this? We have a brain, we have a heart, we got them all. We got the brain and the heart. What do we do with them? We don't know how to use them. So that's where I'm at with what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elder Suzanne. Your questions are a great bridge to what we're going to do next, which is we're going to hold 3 minutes of silence for us just to go into our hearts and listen and ask why. And then following this 3 minutes of silence, Kosin is going to lead us into a compassion practice. And we will hear from final words from our speakers, about 3 minutes each for each speaker. And just as a reminder for a time check, we're at 11:30 and this does end at noon, Alaska Daylight Time. So let's do 3 minutes of silence, and then Kosin, I'll turn it over to you.
So just feeling into our bodies. Karuna, the word that's translated as compassion from Sanskrit, is to feel the pain of the world so deeply that we want to reach out and end it. We want to work to end it. So to do that, we need support. So first, just to let our lower body feel fully the support of the chair we're in, to feel that support. And then the structure of the building beneath that. And then beneath the building, the whole of Mother Earth. That Mother Earth extends in every direction beyond our capacity to even understand, but we can let our bodies rest fully in Mother Earth. Feeling the upward holding of our whole body. That we are not alone, but held. And then the thinking mind that can sometimes distract us. Allowing that space behind the eyes, the mind, to expand as the sky. To be without limits, the vastness of the mind as the sky. The kind of tense thoughts and everything that might be gripping us, slipping out into the vast sky as birds or clouds, free to move. The body grounded deeply in the earth and the mind wide. To free the heart. And maybe something came up for us during this time that was a pain in the heart, to let the heart open fully to it. The warmth, the great capacity of our ancestors in our heart. And to accept that pain in, but not to hold on to it. Just allow the pain to be felt with the support of Mother Earth, the vastness of the sky. And allow it to have its life, for that pain to feel the love of our hearts, the love that's been shown to us, that we can now show to this pain. And as we take the wound in, as we feel whatever part of this has come up for us, we don't hold on to the pain, we give it to Mother Earth and we give it to the sky. Our little bodies can't do it. It is our connection with everything that allows the pain of this wound to be metabolized. And as we breathe in to the heart, we feel the pain, and as we breathe out, we release it. Breathing in, we feel. Breathing out, we release. Accepting the whole of the world and giving ourselves back to the whole of the world.
Take another 3 minutes to let the nutrients of what Kosin just said sink in. And then next we'll hear, after 3 minutes, we'll hear Reverend Michael for 3 minutes, and then another silence to let, again, each speaker's words sink in.
Friends, as a way to close my part of our time today, I'm going to start us with a prayer from the contemplative Christian tradition that I come from, and I'll close with a prayer from the Salish people on the land where I grew up. And the first prayer goes like this. May we all see what we have always been. May those around us see what they have always been. And may we come together in our understanding. Amen. Both as a community organizer and as a monk, I have this tradition of in the Christian world of remembering Christ. And instead of just meaning that we repeat his name and use it as a weapon, the way my forefathers have sometimes done, in the mystical tradition, especially of the Orthodox world, that remembering meant a kind of putting back together, remembering. And we take that very seriously in my work, that the work we do to build relationships with one another is a remembering of a sacred body beyond any one form or name or the captivity of some definition that was culturally specific. So the blessing I would leave us with is a calling of remembering. that that the work we do begins and ends not only inside ourselves, but also outside ourselves, and that those things are not as opposed as we are sometimes led to believe. That there is a profound spiritual work to be done in the midst of making new friends, making connections with people who are different from us, and doing the metabolic work of making space for that in our hearts and in our communities. So I encourage each of you, if you take one thing from my portion of our time today, to find those relationships, not just as a consumer listening, but as someone who you dare to be in active friendship with. Nothing more liberating than friendship, I suspect. And that here at Wisdom Weavers is a great place to start, but I imagine you already know some inkling in your heart, some place that, boy, I need to be reaching out to this person from this tradition or from this background, and to see what unfolds. So many beautiful stories today of how friendships and how relationships, surprising ones, led to such great transformation. So I will leave it at that, but I would like to close with a Salish prayer that has meant everything to me over the years. And because you are all muted and I am not, I am going to, it's a short prayer. I'm going to leave space for you to repeat each line after me if you feel so moved. And so I will say it, and then you can say it, and so on. But don't unmute, because on Zoom it would just be chaos, I suspect, with the distortions. But this comes from the Salish people, and at least those on the coast of Washington State and in the Salish Sea where I grew up. And it goes like this. May all that I think, may all that I say, may all that I do be in harmony with thee. Spirit within me, spirit beyond me, maker of the trees. Amen. Thank you.
Just give a minute or so to let that sink in, and then we'll hear from Valerian, and then Suzanne, and then Larian will close this meeting with a prayer. And again, we're at 11:46, and this meeting ends at noon. Just 1 minute, just to let that sink in.
You know, Einstein said something like, you can't solve the problems of the world by the same consciousness that created the problems. And we, of course, are using the same consciousness which is in the mind. And the heart is not telling the mind what to do. And so this is considered insanity by doing something that we know doesn't work. And everything that we're doing now, people of good heart and good mind are focusing, the elders say, we're energy beings. We are mental, physical, and spiritual energy. And when we pour energies into stopping something like political corruption, the gross violation of women, refugees, and all these things, where good people of good heart are trying to stop it. And what happens, according to the elders, is that as energy beings, we're putting our mental, physical, and spiritual energies into that which we're trying to stop. And it gets bigger. And so nothing new is created. They say that instead we must focus on that which we want to see in the world without reaction to anything. And then something new will be birthed, but it's going to be birthed through the help and leadership of the women of the world. That's what the indigenous people say, is that the women will take the lead during this time. Now, amongst my people, we had a matrilineal society where the women initiated the shamans, not the other way around. And we have a moon calendar and all these kinds of things. And we have a story about the womb at the center of the universe, a place of creation and creativity. And that nothing new is created until it's created there. But the identical, women all over the world used to be considered sacred at one point in time. And it's now, because of the masculine imbalance, not there. And that we got, as Native peoples, our original instructions, which you have heard about before. We got it from the womb at the center of the universe. We didn't invent it. We didn't spend thousands of years trying to iron out our rules and regulations. We just received it. And when we pray, we give thanks and gratitude towards Aro, the Maker, the Spirit that lives in all things. And we don't talk about, please, give me this, give me that. My friend is dying. Could you help her? No, we just give gratitude because we have been given everything that we need. Everything. And that the most unselfish thing that we can do today, now, is heal ourselves. And the rest will be taken care of because you will be in the heart, which is the only place, according to my people, that is connected to the divine. I think it was Deepak Chopra that said, God can only be found in the silence between one's thoughts. It's not going to be in the past or the future. It's only here, now, present in the moment, and in the heart. That's the way my people lived. And that's why they developed the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in all of North America for our time. And my elder, that Suzanne mentioned, Father Lesenkoff on St. Paul, said, look, you see that seabird over there? You think it worries about where it's going to get the food the next day? And are we any different? Think about it. The answer, of course, is no. That all we need, all Mother Earth needs for us to do now is to heal ourselves and then listen to our hearts. Because Mother Earth has survived for billions of years, she's going to survive for billions more. It's a question about whether or not we humans are going to survive. And there is no singular guru anymore. And we need each other all over the world now. That we, the Hopi and Maori say, let go of the sides of the riverbank, move toward the center, find those who have done the same, and celebrate. And what that means is letting go of the sides of the riverbank means letting go of all human attachments. Move to the center means moving to your proverbial heart center and the center of the river of life because it knows where it's going, we don't. And find those who have done the same means find those who have had the courage, like you did, to jump. That is going to be the new definition of tribe. The old definitions are in essence, a way of separation. It has become, because of the masculine imbalance, a way of separation. That's why we created countries, to separate. We created different languages to separate. Before, we used to have the language of one. It's a language that where we could talk with anything in the universe. So thank you.
Valerian. Let's just take 1 minute of silence, and then Suzanne, you are going to end this, close it out with your 3 minutes, and then Valerian will offer the closing prayer, and we'll say goodbye for today. For 1 minute, please. Suzanne.
In closing, I would like to say what the Holy Spirit says to each one of us. Holy means whole. The Holy Spirit said to us in several documented forms, we are created perfect, healed, and whole. Thank you, Holy Spirit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. 1 more minute, and then Valerian. And we'll just end with Valerian's words. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Helen, thank you so much for sharing your words with us. That was a lovely surprise. And so sorry. So we'll do 1 minute, and then I'll turn it over to Valerian, and then we'll close for the day. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for having the patience and fortitude to listen to us. We're very grateful. And one thing I want to add that I didn't say before is that women, the identical field of energy that is in the womb at the center of the universe is in each woman's womb. And that when women get together in sisterhood and heal the traumas of past lives and existing lives, and then project their what is the energy in the womb inside of themselves to the outside collectively, a container will be made where something new is going to be birthed. Until this happens, nothing new is going to be birthed in this world. So, okay, take a deep breath. Aho, Tumaligaligasa Tingi Tanisada, Ushawan and Itanisada, Kano and Itanisada. Grandfather, Great Spirit, Spirit that lives in all things, Grandmother, one of many names, God, Jesus. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the sacred circle of people who come with open hearts. We thank you for our loved ones. We thank you for all existence. We thank you for all of your teachings, inside and out, of your love. Love that is shown in the teachings, like the eagle that teaches us that we can soar high and see far. Like the salmon that teaches us that we too can come home to you. Like the trees that teaches us we need to be rooted to grow tall and be strong. Like the owl that teaches us that we too can see in the dark. These and many other teachings, if we have the ears to listen. Aho, kagalako, anganis.
Thank you all. I was nourished. Thank you.